Hello, everyone. Welcome to Moviehouse Mystics. I'm Cody Ewell.
And I'm Kevin Gainey. So this is a very special episode. It's our first remote recording, isn't it?
Yeah, we're having some technical difficulties, but I think we'll hopefully figure it out.
Yeah. So what's happened since we last recorded back in June?
So I had some wisdom teeth removed. I got two on the right
I had four.
side.
I had four.
Here we go. The Brian Regan warned us about it.
Yeah. Never try to
tell a two wisdom tooth.
Oh, yeah, because the four wisdom teeth people are like, I had it all out at once, and I didn't have any anesthesia whatsoever.
Yeah, I mean, this guy was good. He put in this long-lasting anesthetic, so it wasn't like numb, but it didn't hurt, and it lasted for like several days. But 4 sounds a little more intense.
Yeah, it is. I mean, like the next few days after, I felt like Brando in The Godfather.
Yeah. The little tooth implant.
Did you end up touching your face, like, curiously for, like, the next few hours when it was still numb? Like, oh, wow. Like, the little surreal moment.
Crazy block. It was, like, in the nose area, too. It was completely numb. It felt like, half my face was just not there.
All right, well, we better not give anybody any ideas. Otherwise, they're going to try to use recreational Novocaine.
No, we don't want that, but... Anyway, so we were going to jump back in with Monty Python, but with the teeth and everything to delay, we decided, you know what, we're going to get right into Jaws because recently we saw that, and it seems perfect between end of summer and Halloween.
Yeah, it is, and it was
choice.
Also, when we went to see it, it was quite the event because we saw it at the Coolidge Corner Theater over in Brookline on 35mm film, and I was trying to get you to watch this movie on your own through any other streaming service, but you insisted on seeing it in 35mm on the big screen. And why was that?
So there's several reasons. First off, I like the look of film, and I think if you're going to see a big blockbuster type movie, you want to see it on film, but that's not always an option. And with Jaws, it's one of those kind of cult classics that you go there, and I wanted to kind of get the experience in the theater as somebody would have when it first came out. And it was even cooler than that because it was kind of this whole communal thing where people knew the lines, they were cheering when certain ones came, and it was just awesome. And I thought that was having that kind of, the audience around and also seeing it on film was the way to do it.
Yeah, it is. What I loved, I actually looked up the reason why 35mm film is still very popular. Like, we even saw Oppenheimer last summer in 70mm, but the reason why a lot of people still love seeing it on film is because the lighting is easier on the eyes. It's much more natural, if there's a way to describe it.
The actual shutter flicker and stuff, it feels a lot better because, you remember when the Hobbits movies came out, they shot that in like 48 frames a second, and people were getting headaches because it was just watching it wasn't working with their eyes.
There are a lot of other reasons. I'm sure there are some diehard Lord of the Rings and Tolkien fans out there that are explaining why they didn't like the Hobbit movie. I don't want to open that can of worms right now. We could focus on Jaws. So, what was so cool about this event was that it was hosted by, listeners won't realize this because they can't see me making air quotes, Matt Hooper, which was Richard Dreyfuss's character. One of the guys at the Coolidge Corner Theater shows up dressed like his character during his introduction, and he was accompanied by Bruce the Shark, who was wearing one of those...
That was fun.
Yeah, like one of those inflatable
like
shark
inflatable
costumes.
Kind of...
Yeah, you got a little fan in the back.
He was wandering around.
They had a contest before we started screening the film about a scar contest. So like 10 people all come up because it's a reference to the whole line, you want to see something permanent, when Quint and Hooper are comparing their scars. So we go down this whole line, and people are going out and they're telling stories about how they got their scars. And it's these gruesome stories, and whoever had the most interesting story would get a free pass to the theater.
Yeah, there were some good ones there. People can be pretty reckless.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, some moments where I'm like, you know what? Do I really need to pay attention to all these stories? Can I just tune out for a little bit? It's getting to be a little much.
We wanted the movie to start.
Yeah. But so let's go over the basic information. This was released June 20th, 1975, nearly 50 years ago, and it was one of Steven Spielberg's first movies, and it was quite the movie to make an impression with, don't you think?
It was huge. People were flocking out to see it, and it was interesting because we talk about, people not liking how the shark looked and stuff, but people really liked that, and they liked this kind of mysterious element to it, and it's amazing that this was one of the first ones he did.
Yeah, and this is considered the first ever summer blockbuster. It was on a $9 million budget, and that wasn't even the original budget. I think it was like around $4 million, and it went over to $9 million. I think that was a lot of mechanical problems with the shark. It ended up grossing $476 million worldwide. Talk about another return on investment.
Even more substantial than I think any other one we've talked about on this podcast.
Yeah, and it held the record for the highest grossing movie of all time for 2 years until Spielberg's buddy George Lucas released Star Wars, the very first one, in May of 1977. It won 3 Oscars, including Best Musical Score for John Williams' iconic music, and he was actually conducting the ceremony's music that year. And so when he won... Hey, do you want to get sued?
I would prefer not to, but...
Well, that would mean that Spielberg knows who we are, so we feel a little vindicated. When he was conducting that score at the ceremony, when he eventually won his Oscar, he had to run up from the orchestra pit to go up and receive it, give a quick little speech, and then run right back down.
It's interesting how these very simple kind of musical motifs can really make an impact. I mean, Interstellar's another one I could think of. It's just a chromatic incrementation, and it just sticks in the brain, and people can remember it, and then it catches on.
I mean, it's almost as memorable as the movie itself, if not more.
Yeah.
In case our listener has forgotten exactly what goes on in this movie, I think maybe we should do a simple recap, don't you think?
As always, I think it's good. We'll get into some spoilers here, but...
So, this movie starts off with what is considered one of the scariest scenes of all time, in which a bunch of young people, college kids, are having a bonfire beach party one night, and this one guy makes eye contact with a girl named Chrissy, who invites him to go swimming at dusk. What ends up happening? She gets eaten. And she's eaten by this unseen force, because we are seeing this from the perspective of the shark. So it gives this real indication of a monster beneath the depths is like not just taking a swift bite out of her, but is really going to town on her and making her despair.
Now, I don't know that it's actually a term that was ever used, but I remember in 6th grade, my music teacher was talking about the Jaws score, and he talks about this scene, and he remembers as a kid being terrified, and there was this machine that he said they called the Thrasher. It was actually, she was strapped to... And, this was all practical effects. And it was intense to film, and it showed.
Yeah, I believe that she even was injured at one point while she was filming this scene, as they're just, whatever is underneath the water, whatever thrashing machine over there yanked her too hard at one point. I also know that the actress who played Chrissy just passed away within the last year. I don't recall her name off the top of my head, but rest in peace to someone who contributed to one of the most iconic movie scenes of all time.
We've lost too many people this year.
I think we say that every year.
Yeah, that's true.
So the very next scene, we get introduced to Martin Brody, who is the chief of police at Amity Island, where this movie is set. Now, he is a New Yorker. He makes that very clear throughout it. And then there's this whole emphasis that he's an outsider, because you hear his background conversation at one point. His wife is talking to another local, and she says, "When do I get to be an islander?" And they bluntly say, like, you don't get to be an islander. You weren't born here and you weren't raised here, despite the fact that you own a house here. Your husband's the chief of police, sort of deal. But it's not in this very condescending manner. It's just like, hey, this is just the reality. This is the reality of the culture here. Here's the really interesting part. Brody is actually afraid of the water.
It's an interesting phobia to have for somebody living on an island.
Oh, yeah, they point that out throughout the movie, and he says it's only an island when you look at it from the water.
I mean, theoretically, any continent's an island. It's just a lot larger.
So Brody, he gets the call about Chrissy, and he and the boy that she was hooking up with, they end up finding her remains washed up on the beach, and he gets a call from the coroner who says this was probably a shark attack, which gives him the incentive, okay, we got to shut down the beaches, but Mayor Vaughn steps in and gives him like the bureaucratic pushback saying, people come to Amity Island because it is a beach community and the 4th of July is right around the corner. We need these summer dollars.
It's interesting to think some of these communities, I mean, Salem, for example, I was just at Salem, and actually they're having like bushfires nearby, and imagine if they were like, oh, we gotta not worry about the fire because that it's Halloween season. No, I mean, people are at risk, and it is that classic, this is our couple months that people are coming to see us, but you got to balance that.
Yeah. Well, don't you think it would be a little more interesting if you had witchcraft-style murders taking place throughout Salem instead of brush fires?
Boy, that would probably draw more people.
Yeah, it would.
That would be an incentive. They would.
Could you imagine the mayor of Salem saying, "Hey, we got to capitalize on this, guys. Promote this. Get our friends in the Boston Globe to come over and talk about it. Maybe the New York Times."
They should have leaned into it with the shark. Hey, guys, $20 and you get to ride the shark.
Got to get creative. I mean,
you got to get creative, but they didn't.
Yeah.
They just wanted to keep the beaches open.
Yeah. And so not long after that, he's like, okay, there's really not much I can do. And so one of the next scenes shows him, Brody, and his family at the beach. And you could tell how uneasy he is. He's just sitting in his chair, not paying attention to anybody else. And he's just anxiously watching the ocean like he's the lifeguard. And here comes one of the next iconic scenes in which Alex Kintner, like this 12-year-old boy, is swimming on his raft. And suddenly you see the perspective from underneath the water, you know, the point of view going through amongst all the kids' legs. And it looks like it's closing in on Kintner, gets closer, 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 closer. And the music gets faster, faster, faster. And then all of a sudden, what looks like something is rolling from underneath the water with him. And then suddenly this big blurb of blood comes up and the kid just goes flying up and is dragged down with this horrible sound.
Yeah, and we actually get one of the famous shots from this movie that's not that one. It's the dolly zoom.
Yeah, it is. It's that famous Vertigo shot, is it not? Where it's like...
The Hitchcock zoom where you're pulling the camera out and zooming in, or you're zooming out and moving the camera in.
Yeah, because it creates this kind of optical illusion, but it's that whole moment where it's dawning on him and confirming... Yeah, we got a problem here. This isn't something we could brush off like they said earlier. Like they said, oh, well, it was probably just, a boating accident. Why don't we just say that instead?
Yeah.
Yeah. Here's actually a story that I found that I absolutely love about the famous shot of his mother's, like, scavenging the beach with all the kids coming back on, like, calling his name, Alex, Alex, and then his bloody raft washes ashore. So I don't remember how long ago this was, but the woman who played Alex Kintner's mother was in this seafood restaurant, and she's going through the menu, and she sees something there marked the Alex Kintner sandwich, and she gets really excited. She tells the server, and then 5 minutes later, a guy comes running over, points out that he's the owner of the restaurant, and he says, I played Alex in the movie.
Yeah, no, I love those stories.
Yeah, Alex's mother is like, I want justice in some sort of way. I want that shark dead, which is kind of interesting because the whole theme of the book Moby Dick was about Captain Ahab saying, I want revenge on the whale that took off my leg. And one of the characters bluntly tells him, getting revenge on a dumb animal that smote you from blind instinct is pure blasphemy. But it doesn't seem like this is a dumb animal right over here just making an impulse move. It's like, this is a real monster, a real malicious monster, the way they're portraying it in this movie.
Which you have to set up to frame it as the villain. You have to kind of make it have those kinds of emotions.
Yeah, so, I mean, otherwise you're just pitying the shark, and that's not what you want in a movie like this. You want an actual monster that's just here to destroy.
Yeah.
It's a clear, there is no ambiguity, there is no grayness. You just want the clearest definition of evil.
Absolutely. So, yeah, we now see the basically kind of bounty put out to get this shark.
Yeah, and there are too many people that are showing up in the harbor trying to cash in on this. And there's the whole thing with Brody trying to tell people whoa, what are you doing with that dynamite? And trying to get all these people to not overload this one boat. which brings us to the introduction, of Richard Dreyfuss's character, Matt Hooper, from, I can't remember what oceanographic institute. He's a shark expert. And he doesn't know who he is at that point. And he just sees him. He's like, tell those guys just, like, get out of that boat. They're going to overload it. And Hooper's just, like, tries to meekly tell them.
What's all?
Maybe, I don't know. But Cooper tries to meekly tell the people, like, the officer just said, don't overload this boat. And they're like, yeah, whatever. And he just chuckles to himself going, they're all going to die.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, what is there to say about Hooper? So he's from, like, big generational wealth. He points that out.
Yeah, he sets that up there. He's kind of a nerd. I mean, he's nerdy, but there's something about him that it's just like
a little charisma
cool.
to
He
it.
actually is. Yeah.
He's someone we can relate to, though, with his personality.
Absolutely.
So, like, he examines the physical remains of Chrissy, the first victim, and is like, this is not a boating accident. It was a shark. And
yeah,
what do they do next? The next scene is they reel in this giant tiger shark that somebody caught. And they're like, yeah, we caught it. And they're like, what kind of shark is it?
The mayor and everybody's ready to run with this. Like, okay, let's get those beaches, keep them open.
Yeah, one of my favorite parts is next. Like, these guys are gawking at the shark, and they say, what kind of shark is it? And Hooper is just like, oh, tiger shark. And that one guy was like, a what? Yeah. Yeah, that's another thing that makes these movies so iconic, is that occasionally there's a line that's delivered that is absolutely terrible, but it has to remain in the final cut.
Oh, yeah. And then it becomes its own kind of cult following.
Yeah, I mean, everyone really got excited about that line when we were in the screening.
Yeah, it was fun when some of these lines would come. People would just start cheering.
Yeah, I mean that's why you got to see some of these movies on the big screen, because it's like it's an experience. It's like going to a concert. It's like you're seeing your favorite artist sing, and then the artist points the microphone at the crowd, and you sing back.
It really is like a concert. You've mentioned that kind of analog before, and I agree. I think that as far as paying to go see a movie on film or not, even if it's just within a nice theater, and getting that experience really it's more than actually just the film itself. It's the entire everything, getting the popcorn, sitting there, having people, say, have you seen it before? And that it's a whole experience.
And everybody's also, they wear merchandise over there too.
Yeah.
So that's the other thing. And there was a lot of Narragansett beer on sale, because a lot of our listeners will know, if they've seen the movie, Fisherman Quint, played by Robert Shaw, who was in another movie that we reviewed, The Sting. He played Doyle Lonigan, the gangster. That's his favorite beer, Narragansett. So they had a lot of Narragansett available as well.
Also a good kind of New England connection.
Yeah.
Classic New England beer. But so this guy is kind of I wouldn't say polar opposite of Lonigan, but he's quite a different character in this movie.
He's a little insane. He's like a little eccentric. That's what it comes down to.
A little?
Yeah, I mean, whatever. But it's the eccentricity that you kind of like. I mean, there probably is a guy like him in nearly every major ocean town in New England somewhere.
Yeah. We'll get to his character a bit more later, but at this point in the movie, we do kind of see the first introduction to him, where he's doing like nails on the chalkboard.
Yeah.
That's actually another one of those things with kind of getting back to source material. SpongeBob, they parodied that in the Alaskan bullworm episode.
Oh, but the guy that's like putting his hook against the glass window just is trying to get everyone's attention, like saying, "Do you have a bathroom?" And his knees are shaking, and they're like, "In the back."
Yeah. Yeah.
Hooper, using his expertise, is like, I don't think this is the shark. The bite radius isn't matching the wounds on the victim's remains. And so I think that's what kind of makes this movie a little unsettling when you think about it is, like, they do a little autopsy later that night when, you know, there's nobody around because they don't want to, like, you know, make everyone sick. Like, the Hooper said he wanted to do an autopsy over there, and the mayor was just like, we are not doing a half-ass autopsy in front of all these people here and watching a little kid spill all over the dock. And
yeah, so my problem also is that they called that an autopsy, and when it's on a animal, it's a necropsy. Just semantics of nerds.
You know what you're reminding me of right now? Jordan from Conan O'Brien's show. He's just trying to make it seem like he knows the real answer, and everybody's just like, dude, just shut up.
I have to. But
jeez,
no,
what a
I
wet
think everybody,
blanket.
if that's the suspending of disbelief you have to do with this movie, that's...
All right, so they cut open the tiger shark, and they're like, okay, there are no human remains in here. And so that's kind of the scarier part, is not only do you have the great white shark Bruce, which is what everyone refers to him as, because the mechanical shark was named after Spielberg's lawyer, actually.
I love that.
So not only do you have Bruce swimming around the waters of Amity Island, you also had a tiger shark over there, which is a man-eater, too. So it's like, should we be going back in these waters if there are two big sharks here?
Of all the actual shark attacks, I believe tiger sharks are the very few shark attacks there are, tiger sharks are one of the more attacky.
Attacky. That's exactly what the marine biologists use to describe it in their textbooks. It's an attacky
Kevin,
shark.
I have to use the proper nomenclature. I just got on you for necropsy. I got to use the term attacky.
Oh man, you were such a wet blanket.
Sorry.
Yeah, and so after this discovery that, okay, this is not the shark that killed Chrissy or Alex Kittner, Hooper's like, come on, we're gonna go search for the shark in my massive boat at night, to which, like, Brody, when he's on it, he's just marveling at all the technology. First he says, do you get the Late Show on this? And
yeah, I mean, this boat was kind of impressive. It had radar and sonar and
satellite and all these other things.
Yeah.
It's about the size of a luxury yacht. It looks like a luxury yacht.
Yeah.
He says to him, who pays for this? The government? And he's like, I actually paid for this myself. To which he says, you rich? And you're like, yeah. And then he probes further. He's like, how much? And he's like, what, me personally or the whole family? Jealous. Yeah. And it's so interesting. So they're going through and they're like, oh, well, there's something out there. They see in like whatever the radar is. And they come across this boat that looks like it's been destroyed and went to hell. And Brody remarks, that's Ben Gardner's boat. He's a local fisherman. And this, in my opinion, is one of the spookier scenes in the movie when they're pulling up to the wreck, and like there's all this fog and steam coming off the water, and they got the searchlight going through it, and the beams of light going through it, and there's that low musical note by Williams that's like, oh wow, something really bad is happening right here.
Yeah, and they set it up earlier. All these people are going out to try to find the shark, and the shark is just hunting them.
Yeah. And I like, Hooper's like, I want to take a closer look at this. And Brody's like, let's just tow it in. It's like, we will. I just want to get a little look at this. And it's like one of those moments in a scary movie where you're kind of talking to him in the back of your mind saying, don't do it, man. Don't do it. And, you know, Hooper puts on his wetsuit and everything. He's like, I'll be back in like 5 minutes tops. And then as he's swimming around, he finds the hole in the boat with a great white shark's tooth stuck in there. He pulls it out, and it's like, okay, something's up, and the music is getting a little faster, and he sticks his hand in and rolls around, and what pops out? But the decaying body of Ben Gardner, missing one of the eyes, probably eaten by a crab. Just pops up right over there.
That was probably the scariest shot in the whole movie, because you know something's coming, and then it's just all there.
Yeah, I mean it's not the shark eating Hooper as you would think it is, but that's just scarier. It's like you didn't expect the body to just come up like that.
Yeah, I mean, it looks like a zombie.
Yeah. And, they tell the mayor, they're just like, look, you saw the boat, we towed it in. And he's still kind of like, he's still a little skeptical because, like, Hooper points out, it's like, I pulled the tooth out. And the mayor's like, where's the tooth right now? And it's like, really? You saw the shipwreck. You probably saw the dude's body, and you're still trying to downplay this? Well, it's also very interesting because, it's all about real estate and economics. And the original novel had a darker undertone to it. There was a darker story to it, which was that the mayor had mafia connections, and the mafia didn't want the real estate prices to plummet. So they're the ones telling him, keep it open. So I guess this is a more lighthearted way to put it without making like such malice, like contaminating everybody. So this movie makes it out to be like he's just simply trying to make sure the economy stays afloat. Not like he's under pressure from the mob.
Yeah, but I think it's still the same message is there, that this is, in his mind, a very economic issue, and it's not about, people are dying. There's something really bad. It's like, well, wouldn't it be horrible if property values decreased?
Yeah, but oh well. So it's become pretty clear. He's like, we're going to have the 4th of July this year, whether, you like it or not. And so everybody shows up at the beach. Nobody's going in the water until, like, the mayor probes this one family. He's like, why don't you guys go on in? Just make everyone else feel like it's safe. And it's that whole moment where the family, like, they're all looking at each other like they're using us as guinea pigs, but they all go out there, like, holding their hands, kind of like, we might die together.
Yeah.
But then nothing happens, and everybody just storms into the water.
And then we get this little prank.
Yeah, so you see a dorsal fin, and everybody panics and runs out of the water. In fact, you also see one of the side effects of a panic or a stampede. There's an old guy, like, passed out, like, right on the edge of the beach, and people have to drag him on there, like, emphasizing how terrible a panic can be. And you find out it was just 2 kids with their snorkels and a cardboard fin.
And this is another trope we see time and time again that references this movie. I've seen even memes yesterday where it's that kind of prop dorsal fin and everybody's freaking out.
Yeah. And, you had this frustrating moment that maybe it's like, okay, is everybody going to be able to go back in the water after this? We were just pranked by a bunch of kids and we had this panic. I mean, everyone's probably, like, talking with themselves like, okay, is it worth going back in the water if we're going to get scared again? And
Boy Who Cried Wolf kind of people, they get desensitized, but they know that can happen, so they don't want to go back in the water.
Yeah, but unfortunately, it's who cares about the prank, because the shark actually shows up in the pond section of the beach. And there's the whole scene, like, where Brody asked his son, who's in a sailboat that he got for his birthday, just hang out in the pond, even though it's where all the old people hang out, but just go over there. And he and his friends are trying to set up the boat with everything. And another guy comes rowing by in his boat, and he's, like, telling them, no, do this with your sheet and your line and everything like that. And you see the shark coming right back behind him, bumps into both boats, everyone falls over, and the guy who came over to offer help, loses his leg. You just see his leg just float right to the bottom.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's, like, the first time you see the shark in the movie, too.
That's true. Up until that point, you're only either seeing, like, a point of view or the results of the attack.
Yeah. And so this is one of those moments. So Brody's son goes into shock and has to be hospitalized for the night. And Brody sees the mayor over there, and he doesn't look like his presentable networking self that you've seen throughout the movie. His hair's a mess. His tie is undone. His top button's undone. And he's trembling and smoking a cigarette. And, like, Brody's like, you're going to sign this contract right now. That's what you do best, because we are going to hire Quint to kill the shark. And he's kind of stammering to himself. He's like, I was only trying to help the town's interests and everything. And he's like, come on, just do this. And how you even see the contrition on his end when he trembles and says, my kids were on that beach too. So
Yeah.
even though he was arrogant over there in his hubris, you can see the remorse and contrition. He is humanized in that moment.
Yeah, and he signs it, and they bring on board the wacky, quirky Quint.
Yeah, because like you see, like through his headquarters, there are like all these skeletons and remains from sharks. Like he's going through a pot right now where he's like stripping the flesh off of some other jaws.
It's like a boiling cauldron, and he's like, I'm working on this specimen.
Yeah, and like he gives Brody a shot of some liquor that he made himself, and like he drinks it with like delight, and Brody takes his sip and then waits till he's away and just like spits it out. And then Hooper tries to take a shot himself, and then he's just like, don't drink that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so they get on the Quint's ship, which is named the Orca, which also tells you a lot about his personality because orcas are predators for sharks.
Yeah, the killer whale.
Yeah.
And it doesn't get that name for no reason.
Yeah. I mean, that's not the type of whale that you want to run into. I mean, who the hell thought it was brilliant to have those at SeaWorld interacting with all the human trainers? Because they have killed several people.
Slight tangent. I actually did a summer camp at SeaWorld many years ago. I was in like 6th going into 7th grade. And they would not let us within 10 feet of the orcas. I mean, other dolphins and stuff. Oh, yeah, check these out. And no, they would not let us close to them. But then we go to the shark kind of department, and they have this huge graphic on the wall that's like number of people killed from lightning strikes or this and that. And at the very bottom, it's like 1 person a year or 2 people a year from a shark attack. And that was this huge like thing that I was like, wow, we're allowed near the sharks, but not the killer whales.
Yeah. I mean, think about how crazy that is, that so far in this movie, within the course of a few days, there have already been 4 people killed by a single shark. That's like making the attack rate just like double when you really think about it, big picture.
Yeah.
Yeah. It also should be consoling to the rest of us to say, look, you have a better chance of winning the Powerball than you do of getting bitten by a shark.
Which is depressing, but...
Well, we're not about being realistic in this movie. We are having an adventure, and we are suspending our disbelief. So they eventually set sail to get out to sea, and there's the whole moment where they're trying to bring the shark in to lure it out, and Brody has to like throw the chum in the water. And I love the way they set it up because he's like clearly hating it. He's like putting some sort of chemical in a cloth or a handkerchief to make, and like putting it in his face to be able to tolerate being surrounded by all that horrible decomposing flesh and blood.
I mean, you could talk about good acting. Although I forget if I've heard, they actually sometimes would like put a bad smell or something to force the reaction. But if not, his acting was good. And you could tell whatever that chum was some rotten, disgusting thing. And that unsettling thing, you feel the disgust that he's experiencing.
Well, I love like what happens like in the very, very next sequence when Quint is taking a look from the crow's nest up top. He tells Brody's like, throw some more chum down. And he's like, let Hooper take a turn. And he's like, Hooper drives the boat. And he tells like, you hear me, Hooper? And Hooper's playing solitaire. And as he climbs down, he gets down there. He's like, Hooper, stop playing with yourself. Which I didn't get was like, when I saw this when I was 9, I was like, I didn't get what that was a reference to.
Yeah.
But that's just what makes it so funny as an adult, just to see the eccentric Quint just like, making a self-pleasure reference, like, stop doing this.
Yeah.
But I love the little joke. Go on.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so Brody's like throwing the chum in the water because like he gave some instructions to Hooper's like, slow to the head. And Brody's like, you heard him, slow to the head, whatever it is. And he's like grumbling to himself. He's like, yeah, I can do that. Why don't you come down and throw away some of this shit? And then as he's throwing it in there, you're chuckling at that. But then the shark just pops out of the water. And see the whole bit with like Brody just suddenly like jumps up and like, does he drop his cigarette from his mouth or is it still holding on? I can't remember, but
I can't remember.
But he's looking out there and he's got like this petrified look and like just backs up and says probably the most iconic line in the movie once he reaches Quint. And what is that, Coda?
You're going to need a bigger boat.
And everybody cheered when that line came up.
First off, we have to discuss this line because there's a bit of a Mandela effect, I believe, where everybody, like in Star Wars, Luke, I'm your father. No, the line is, no, I am your father. Here, it's not, we're going to need a bigger boat. It's, you're going to need a bigger boat.
You know what, Norm, I would have just said you're being a wet blanket again for pointing out the specifics over here and correcting everybody, but it's the truth in this situation. I'll allow it. I'll be like the judge in trial. Like, I'll allow it.
For a quote this iconic, I think it's good to be a little specific about it. But yes, Everybody at that point, I mean, it was like, imagine some live sporting event or something, and the home team just won. It was that eruption of,
I mean, it's like, the hometown team were like the MVP of the team, the face of the team hits like, a walk-off home run or something like that, or delivers. But that's when you had the first chase, and you get to see the shark for the first time, everybody, how it just swims alongside the boat, and Hooper makes the remark, like, that's a 20-footer, and Quint says, 25, 3 tons on him. And you realize what you're going up against. And the first thing they're going to do is they're going to harpoon a barrel to the shark to try to exhaust it, sort of thing. Because, like, it'll be forced to, like, remain at the surface because they'll have to be pulling it down against the buoyancy.
Yeah, and it also lets them kind of track the shark. So it's tiring the shark out. It's like you attached basically an underwater parachute to it.
An underwater buoy to it, yeah.
Yeah.
And what I think is so interesting about the music in that scene, because when you see the shark for the first time, you got this terrifying music, but once they harpoon the shark and start chasing it, it's got this upbeat, adventurous tune to it as well, which is so neat about John Williams' score there.
Yeah, it's setting the tone, and it's these kind of big swings of emotion in this movie, and at that point, it's like, we got one. We're doing pretty well.
Yeah.
And the music reflects it.
Yeah, I mean, because it also goes back to the book, too. The book is so dark. All the characters have all these terrible flaws, and, like, Spielberg even commented that he was rooting for the shark to eat some of the people. Whereas in this adaptation, like, turns it into something like, okay, we're going to simplify everything. We're not going to make everything morally ambiguous over here. It's an absolute monster versus some standard good people.
And that's the thing people have to realize, too, with books versus movies. A lot of people say the book's better because it gets into these details and these kind of things. You can't do that on a screen. You have 2 hours, maybe 3 max, and you'll lose the audience if you try to do all these little nuances, and it doesn't work on screen necessarily. So you have to make those choices as a director or screenwriter, really many steps along the way in the process to say, look, we can't bog this down and lose the audience.
Yeah, I mean, you can do it. You can try to do it. There are some movies I'm sure that can pull it off, but it's like there's some clear examples when you can and can't do everything, and you have to realize that each medium has its strengths, and what works for one medium might not work for another medium. Like Stephen King's book, The Shining, everyone talks about how terrified they are of The Shining, but he hated the movie version, but by Stanley Kubrick. But from a cinematic perspective, that is like one of the best movies ever made. But, you have to realize The Shining is one of the scariest books ever written, and Kubrick's The Shining is one of the scariest movies ever made. So what worked for one might not work for the other.
Yeah, when you're adapting something, you have to know your medium and what you keep and what you change.
Yeah.
But, yeah, so at this point, we start getting into, they're exhausting the shark, but it goes from that kind of adventurous, fun thing to pretty terrifying.
Yeah, because what happens? The shark pulls the barrel down and they lose it. And it's like, this is a strong son of a bitch we're dealing with right here.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so that night, Brody actually got whacked in the head with something, so he's got a little bit of a wound on his forehead. And Quint makes the remark, like, you know, you want to see something permanent? And he starts showing some other scars he has. And, like, you know, Hooper starts pointing out some other scars he's received over the years, but both in their shark experiences for guys that, like, really... It's a pleasant scene because, like, Quint and Hooper, they're not exactly buddies. Because, like, you know, like, Quentin is like got all the experience, and he thinks that Hooper, he's dismissive of Hooper as like a trust fund baby or something like that. But now they're comparing scars, they're getting drunk and having fun. And my favorite little detail in that scene is they're cackling and showing off their scars. You cut back to Brody in the distance in the corner. He just opens his belt line and peeks down there. So He's checking his appendix scar. He's like, does this count for the conversation? All right, we're getting to probably one of the most iconic scenes in all of film history, in which Brody says to Quint, what's that scar right there? He's finally getting the confidence to talk to him. Says, what was that scar on your arm? And Quint is just like dismissive. He's like, oh, that's a tattoo I got removed. And a drunk Hooper says, don't tell me. Mother, and he's like cackling maniacally, and you see this expression on Quint's face where he doesn't change his expression. He doesn't even look at him. He simply puts his hand on Hooper's shoulder and says in this very serious tone, that's the USS Indianapolis. And Hooper immediately knows what it is, but he's still super drunk and he has to get the rest of his laugh out. So it's like this weird combination where he's like staring at him terrified and has to get the rest of his giggles out. But he says, you were on the Indianapolis? And Brody's got a smile on his face. He doesn't know the story. He's like, what happened? And Quint tells the story about how he survived one of the most terrifying shipwrecks in history. So, Coda, are you familiar with the story of the USS Indianapolis before the movie?
Not very.
So Quint sums it up in the movie. He says, we just came back from the island of Tinian Lady. We just delivered the bomb. The Hiroshima bomb, and talks about how a Japanese torpedo sank them, and says vessel went down in 12 minutes, 1,100 men go into the water, and he starts describing how the next few days they were lost at sea, how the sharks were picking everybody off one by one by one, and it's all this, it's absolutely blood churling or whatever the phrase is. It's like terrifying to think about how these guys are all hanging out in the water, suffering from heat exposure, dehydration, and all the sharks are picking them off one by one.
Also, that line of, you know, however many men go into the water, that's another one that's been parodied in SpongeBob as well as other things. But another one of those lines that it's really chilling in the actual context, but in other pop culture, it's just this kind of throwaway joke.
Oh, yeah, like in It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, there's a whole bit where there's like a zombie-themed episode, and Charlie starts talking about zombies like he's Quint and Jaws, like, you know, they come at you with those black eyes, like a doll's eyes. They come at you, they don't seem to be living or dead, and they're like, are you doing Jaws? Yeah. I don't know about you, but I think the most chilling moment of that monologue was when he's talking about how they were being rescued, and Quint remarks, that was the time I was most frightened. I'll never put on a life jacket again. And
wow.
But I love the way he ends it. It's like, well, we delivered the bomb, so we got it done. So
mission success.
Technically, yeah. Anyway, so over the next few minutes, like the next few scenes in the movie, the orca basically gets destroyed by the shark, and they get 2 more barrels in on it, and it's this whole thing like, this is a monster, and this is like, you know, it's also like, you know, the shark is also toying with them, bringing up the barrels, like to trick them, and it's not just that like it's just eating you. It's clever. It's trying to lure you into a trap.
Yeah. And the boat, the Orca, is getting quite destroyed. I mean, I don't know how the thing's still afloat at this point.
Yeah. I mean, you could tell they're in a lot of trouble because as Quint goes down and sees the water damage that's all coming up, he sees the life jackets, and there's that whole moment like, damn it. And he comes up with only two. He gives them to Brody and Hooper. He's not taking one for himself. And it's like, all right, we might have to just swim back to shore. And they take that one. They have one last resort. So they brought a shark cage over there. And the goal is, okay, let's get Hooper in there. And he's got, some kind of poison with him. He's like, if I can get it into his mouth. I love how he says, if I can get such and such amount into his mouth, then I could kill him.
So many cc's. It's very, again, back to that nerdy scientific thing. And they're like, we don't care. Just give the shark the drug.
It's also like, well, it has to be exactly this amount. And it's like, God forbid that we put way too much into the one that we're trying to kill the animal already. I'm sorry. It's like, we don't want to go too hard. We got to be civilized. So there's that whole bit where Hooper is in the cage and the shark attacks him through there, gets right through there. And you talked about that was like one of those jump scares that really got you because you think the shark has just swam away.
Yeah.
And just bursts in there.
This is some of the footage here is of actual sharks that they.
Yeah.
They were crew shot.
Yeah, they did. So this was over in Australia where they were getting the footage. And this footage they got actually caused them to change the overall ending of the movie. Because what was originally written was that Hooper was supposed to get killed in the cage. However, like one of the shots that they got, that the B-roll footage was so good. It was like one of the sharks getting stuck in the cage and rolling over. And it didn't have the dummy in it. So they're like, oh, well, continuity-wise, we're going to have to get rid of this scene. Hooper's going to have to survive. So Hooper you got to love how, like, he lucks out over there. He swims out and he just hides under this little crevice. He's like, I'm just going to stay here for a while.
Yeah, in the moment, it seemed like an odd decision. But now with that kind of hindsight, it makes sense that they had to do it to make the story work. But it's like, okay, you're in the cage is not working, but you think you'd be better out of the cage.
But the whole thing is like, I'm staying underwater, but I'm going to hide in this really convenient location. They're just like, you got to imagine they're just like, hey, Spielberg, there's some rocks over there. We can just have, what's his name, Richard Dreyfuss swim over there and just hang out in this silly little shot.
Yeah. So at this point, we kind of lose track of Hooper for a bit.
Yeah, and the shark basically does the last damage on the Orca. It just jumps up, lands on I can't remember, like all the listeners who know anything about boats and terms and everything on the boat, they're going to hate me for saying this. Coda, I'm just grateful that you're not going to be a wet blanket and correct me about what the name of the actual part of the boat is that the shark lands on. But because we both don't have a lot of boating experience. And
it's called the stern.
I don't think it's actually called the stern right over there because it's like the part where they're walking, not the very end of the boat. I don't know. But the ship starts to sink and Brody and Quint have to like hold on, and one of the oxygen tanks rolls over and crushes Quint's hand, and he loses his grip and slides down, and he experiences one of the most gruesome deaths in all of movie history.
A quick aside with this, I was talking to my mom on the phone I don't know, maybe like a week after we saw this, that scene came up because we were talking about people, you go to the hospital and they say, what's your pain on a scale of 1 to 10? And some people are like, oh, it's 11, it's 12. And my mom and I have always been like, you're doing yourself discredit there. But we were talking about like what would be a 10, and she said that scene with Quint getting eaten by the shark is a 10 if I could ever imagine it.
It's biting down on his belly, and all the blood just like splurts out of his mouth. Yeah,
but the shark just chomps him from the feet to the head. What a way to go!
Yeah. Anyway, so Brody is the last one left there. And he gets a little clever, so he's fighting off the shark when it comes back again with one of the oxygen tanks, and it's pretty clear. He just throws it into the shark's mouth because Hooper told him earlier in the movie, be very careful with these because if you drop them, they might blow up. and then like he goes out there with a rifle and starts firing at the shark as it's coming again. And he uses almost all of his rounds. And the last bullet he has, he says, "Smile, you son of a," fires the gunshot. And, the shark just blows up.
And the audience, once again, erupts into cheers.
Because it's like, it is the experience. You're actually going out there and you're cheering that the absolute monster, the simplified absolute monster, is dead. They beat it.
Yeah. That might have been a bigger applause than "You're going to need a bigger boat."
Or even a what?
Yeah. This was everybody in the theater. It was awesome to see that.
Yeah. It was pretty cool. I mean, it's great to cheer along. And my favorite detail about that scene was that as they were preparing it, somebody said to Spielberg, "Isn't this a little far-fetched, like making the oxygen tank blow up like that?" And Spielberg was just like, "I have had them believing everything I have told them for the last 2 hours. They will believe whatever else I will put out in there for the next few minutes."
We talked about that on the Indiana Jones episode, I think it was. That concept of the filmmaker knowing people have suspended their disbelief for so many other things, like calling an autopsy or calling a necropsy an autopsy. The shark that looked clearly fake. If that didn't work, I'm not concerned about this slight far-fetched element.
Yeah, but it's a great way to make it go because its entire body is like destroyed. It's like the best way to defeat an enemy is not just to kill it, but to defile the body in a sense, or just like, I don't know. There's a little bit of the revenge aspect to it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and so right after this moment, Hooper just swims up, and they reconnect up there, and they use the last of the wreckage to make a little raft to paddle back to shore. The end.
It kind of reminds me a little bit of the ending of 20,000 Leagues. It's just this kind of lighthearted return to society after this crazy adventure.
Yeah. So, why don't we go into the background around this movie now that we got our fun retelling of the plot? So, the original novel was written by Peter Benchley, and it was inspired by two things: the Jersey Shore shark attacks of 1916 and a fisherman named Frank Mundus, who was the inspiration for Quint. So, do you know a lot about the Jersey Shore shark attacks?
Not really. It's interesting because I went to the Jersey Shore every summer for basically every year before I went to college. And it was never like a huge thing down there. I've always associated kind of the shark attacks and stuff with much more of a New England thing. But yes, I believe, there were tiger shark attacks, I believe, right?
No, so they're suspected that it was either a great white shark or a bull shark because these attacks actually occurred up a creek along the beaches over the course of like the next 2 weeks. 4 people died and 1 person was critically injured. And so that they narrowed it down based on like the behavior and above all the fact that they were in fresh water. So it's the fact that it's a bull shark, probably.
Yeah.
But that's also kind of what scares me because I've grown up on a cove in Connecticut, which connects to the Connecticut River right out to Long Island Sound. So there are some moments where I've been in the water, like canoeing and kayaking and going for a swim, being like, what if a bull shark just swims up here?
Yeah.
Yeah. But it's that whole, like what Spielberg said, it's what you don't see that scares you.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so
talk about like a film having an impact. I mean, the fact that this has been ingrained into several generations, like being scared to go in the river because there might be a shark.
Yeah. I mean, and when people talk about movies that shark attack movies that scare them from going into water, they're not talking about Deep Blue Sea, the movie that came out 25 years ago. They're not talking about any of these other shark attacks. They're always talking about Jaws. Yeah. And in fact, the first sequel, and all the sequels are terrible, by the way, but the first sequel had like, probably the best thing about it was the tagline for the trailer, which was, for the poster, just when you thought it was safe to go back in the water.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. And what I find interesting, so getting back to the source material of Peter Benchley and Frank Mundus. So first off, Mundus's methods that he used for catching sharks, that they're illegal today. Just like
What
they're not
were his
allowed.
methods?
They were bad enough to merit the public attention and resources to pass laws banning it. So I know that.
Oh, all right. So
And Benchley even regretted writing the book because people went on these mass killing sprees, like revenge sprees on random sharks, to the point where great white sharks are critically endangered right now.
yeah, people. I mean, I think also some of that, a lot of people start justifying their own kind of actions with, well, I saw this thing in film and, it's fine.
I saw it in a movie.
Yeah.
That's why I did it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, the story behind the production was that Universal Studios producers Richard D. Zanuck and David Brown read the book because one of them was married to a woman who was an editor at the publishing company, and she made a remark, oh, this might make a nice movie. And they read it, and they were like, they instantly wanted to turn it into a movie because it was, quote, the most exciting thing that they had ever read. And Spielberg signs on when he's filming Sugarland Express for those guys, another movie that they were making, and he was not the first choice. Would you believe that, Coda?
No, wow. I mean, I guess, again, we're looking at it hindsight. It was one of his earlier things, but you couldn't think of it happening another way.
Yeah, like one of their first choices, the guy's name was Dick Richards. He was tossed because he kept describing the shark like a whale.
Oh, my God.
It's like, dude, we are not filming Moby Dick here. Anyway, Universal Studios, like, Spielberg had second thoughts. He was like, I don't want to be typecast as a sharks and truck action guy. But Universal Studios, in their legal department, they blocked his departure, but they promised him that they could make as many movies as he wanted to afterwards. So that worked out well.
Yeah, and then Universal kind of went with the whole Jaws thing, and they ended up putting rides and different features into their actual parks with the shark. The one in Florida I rode on many years ago. I mean, it's gone now. They put in the Harry Potter land in that area, but it was, it's still like a fake shark popping up, but it was still this intense, like, yeah. But it's interesting how much Universal really wanted to lean into this movie, but I guess also the rides went in because the movie was successful.
Yeah, let's make a ride at a theme park for a movie that flopped financially. That's a smart idea for investors. So, like we talked about earlier, the source material, the novel, was a lot darker than the final product of the movie because Spielberg added levity to the story because, like I said earlier, he was rooting for the shark to eat some of the characters because he couldn't stand them. One of the things they did, so the guy who wrote the script was Carl Gottlieb, so he was one of the writers on The Odd Couple. And so you could see how he added some of the levity to it. Yeah. They removed, so Matt Hooper and Brody's wife have an affair in the novel. And so Spielberg was like, we're going to remove that because we don't want anything getting in the way of their camaraderie while they're hunting. And even told Richard Dreyfuss, do not read the novel. Just read the script. So it looks like it was filmed at Martha's Vineyard. I've been on the bridge. I've jumped off the bridge that Brody looks out from where, like, after the pond shark attack scene. My mom always points that out. And they picked Martha's Vineyard because of the shallow water for the underwater shots. Because there's actually a big shipwreck just off Martha's Vineyard, I think. The Andrea Doria, which, Coda, are you familiar with that story?
I don't think so.
It was an Italian cruise liner that sank off the coast of Martha's Vineyard. Like 50 people died. And there are a lot of people who have...
This might actually sound familiar.
Yeah, and to this day, there are a lot of people who have tried diving down there, free diving, or like scuba diving, and all these accidents happen. You can look it up. There are so many fatalities of people trying to go down there because the wreck is relatively deep. It's like only 50 feet under the water.
Yeah, people got to stop visiting these shipwrecks. It results in death.
Yeah, and stop trying to climb Mount Everest just because you can.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Spielberg's original plan was that he wanted to train a live great white shark. And, it didn't take too long for them to figure out, oh, we can't do this. So they made 3 mechanical sharks. They named him Bruce after Spielberg's lawyer. And you're going to love this, Coda. Supervision of construction was done by Bob Matty, who oversaw the special effects for the giant squid in your favorite movie that we reviewed, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea.
I didn't realize this until you put it in the outline. I thought that was so cool because 20,000 Leagues, I mean, it's actually kind of funny to me because to me, a lot of those effects hold up better than some of the shots of Bruce in this movie. But I still love the connection, and, I think it was as good as it needed to be for the movie to be excellent.
Well, I mean, you even pointed out that, the shark looked fake, obviously, but it was what they did with the terrible mechanical prop that made it work. And everybody was still afraid of it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So filmmakers, young filmmakers out there, it doesn't matter what you have. It's what you do with it. Let that be a lesson.
Yeah. I always was much more interested in visuals and stuff, and then realizing you got to come from a place of story, and you have to have something or nobody cares. It's what makes a lot of these films hold up.
Yeah. So this was the first major movie filmed at sea, and you can imagine how difficult the production would be. Like, not only with the mechanical shark, they go over budget with that, and it wasn't working. Just there's so much going on. There were like problems like unwanted boats just popping up in the background of all their shots, and like, we can't do this right now. And actors are falling into the water. They got to dry off their costumes and reapply their makeup. And by the time they're ready to shoot again, the sun's starting to set. So they can't film. They got to save it for tomorrow. And a lot of people in the crew called it flaws.
A lot of stuff. I mean, you got to think also when this was shot. So I checked the film stock they shot it on. It was Eastman 100T, I believe, but it was 100 ISO. So you needed a lot of light. So if the sun is your key light there, then I guess roll with that. But any additional lighting and stuff, you're going to need generators on the boats. You're going to need all this stuff. And generators are loud. You're recording sound. So there's a lot of this that you don't even consider of why it was so difficult. We look at it from today's lens and you're like, oh, well, it's easy to shoot on a boat. It wasn't then.
Well, yeah, I mean, James Cameron even talked about one of those iconic scenes in Titanic where Jack tells Rose, stretch out your arms on the bow. And she's like, I'm flying, Jack. And he said we had to wait for the right timing to get the sunset like that for that specific light. We had to wait several days, maybe a couple weeks. And he was talking about filming Avatar. It's like, look, we did it all blue screen right over there. It goes to show you what you can do today. With today's technology, you could easily film this movie indoors, and you believe it's an outdoor movie.
Absolutely. I mean, look at like Life of Pi and stuff. I mean, the technology now exists, but at the time, even the simple scenes, just simple dialogue scenes, would have required immense resources to pull off.
Well, I mean, think about it today. You could probably make a feature film on your iPhone. Like with all the editing features that you have over there and the camera features, I mean, just you could film the entire movie and just keep all the equipment in your pocket.
Yeah, but yet people don't do that because they haven't written the story or they haven't actually thought out a lot of the other stuff. It's kind of like we have now the technology they didn't have then, but the writing and storytelling skills are not there nowadays. So
no. Man. I mean, but here's the best part of the movie, the background of the movie production, which I thought was, it absolutely made it. It was a fork in the road moment for them. They find out the mechanical sharks are not working. So the original plan was they were going to show, like in the very first scene when Chrissy dies, they were going to show her getting devoured above the water and under the water. But they're like, what are we going to do? It's not working. And Spielberg capitalized on the idea of let's just shoot everything from the shark's point of view. And the way he described it afterwards, he said, the film went from a Japanese Saturday matinee horror flick to more of a Hitchcock, the less you see, the more you get thriller.
Yeah.
And I sent you a quote that Alfred Hitchcock said after he saw Jaws. Do you happen to have that available? I can't remember it, but it was a fancy theatrical way to say Spielberg thinks outside the box.
It was about the proscenium and kind of I forget what the actual quote was, but it was this idea of you have the proscenium theater, which is your classic like Broadway theater where you have the audience and you have the actors on stage, and the proscenium is the fourth wall. That might have been the quote.
Yeah. So he's saying to everybody, he thinks outside the box. He's thinking like, okay, you don't have to do everything that's traditional over there. You can find another way to do it. And I think what we have to conclude with is the soundtrack. So everybody knows the Jaws soundtrack, even if they haven't seen the movie. Yeah, 2 notes is pretty easy to commit to memory. Also, the kind of Amity Island theme, the more fun, jaunty, sea shanty kind of music, another one of those classic, kind of the bonus you get from John Williams, and it's not, his standard, you think of the main Star Wars theme, but then that's not my favorite theme within, those. It's that kind of melodic thing you hear at the end of several of the movies, and John Williams is really able to do both parts, is the intense stuff, and then underscore the fun, more lighthearted scenes too. Yeah. My favorite detail about this is that when Williams, so he had previously worked with Spielberg on his previous movie, The Sugarland Express, I believe, and he comes back to do this movie, and he plays the theme on the piano, those 2 notes, E and F or F and F sharp, for all the music aficionados who are listening. And Spielberg thought it was a joke. He was like, okay, what's the real theme? Yeah. But one of the things I loved about it was like the other little elements that are in it, because this is supposed to be kind of like the shark's heartbeat, and the shark is getting closer, closer, closer. And there are some scenes, I think, like there's like a horn that goes into it, which I think really amplifies that this is an oceanic theme, because it's kind of like the foghorn that you hear out in the distance. Yeah. Yeah. And like the foghorn in our theme song. Yeah. Just about. And like we were saying earlier, I love how it jumps back and forth between terrifying and adventurous, because what we were saying earlier, like you said about the Amity Island theme, but the whole scene when they first chase the shark is, terrifying, but then it goes into this upbeat adventure. Like, we're going to get this thing. And yeah. Yeah. I mean, it just goes to show you his range. And Spielberg claims that the music contributed to the film's success. It was like a major catalyst. I mean, that was the same story with the next movie that would break Jaws' summer blockbuster record. Star Wars is like, it was the music. Arguably Indiana Jones too. I mean, these themes people probably have heard many times before they ever even watch the movie these days, and they know the themes. They can connect it. Yeah, I mean, it's not just that you know the music first. It's what enabled its success, because you've seen those videos of Star Wars where they remove the very first Star Wars, when they remove the music and like they're getting their medals at the very end, and they're just making those footstep sounds of them walking down to get the medals, and you hear a few people coughing over there and just a few clinks. But it's all based around the music. The music can make a movie. Like, sometimes even no music makes a movie. Yeah. It's knowing what you're trying to accomplish and putting together a good team. And if you could have a team with John Williams on it, I'll take that any day. Well, I mean, John Williams has done nearly every Spielberg movie since Jaws, when you really think about it. What was it? Jurassic Park. Jurassic Park. One of my favorite stories is when he did Schindler's List. Spielberg talks about how John Williams' method is he doesn't read the script. He doesn't go to the production or watch anything. He waits for the first raw footage to come, where they like piece together the little bits, and you'll watch that. It's like, okay, I'm going to analyze this and think about what's going to work here. And when he did Schindler's List, Spielberg comes back with the raw footage for that. And Williams is like, I have to go take a walk. And he comes back after like, how long? And he says to Spielberg, you need a better composer. There's no way I can do this. And Spielberg said, I know. The problem is they're all dead. Well, sorry to end the episode on a depressing, sad note. That's what happens when you bring up the Holocaust.
Well, that's generally, yeah. That's why you don't bring it up. But
yeah.
One thing that, ending this episode, a note that kind of ties back to our cold open that you mentioned that was funny. The sharks have a lot of teeth, and they keep growing teeth and losing teeth. Imagine if wisdom teeth grew back after you got them extracted.
Well, I mean, maybe they do happen if you've been exposed to gamma rays. Like, Coda, you weren't planning on... You didn't go to... You're not planning to go to Chernobyl, are you? Because there are people who vacation there.
No active plans. But no, it's funny you say that because actually there's this new technology. It's a... it's not a laser, but it's like an ultrasonic ablator that they can now zap the wisdom teeth before they even grow in kids, so they don't have to get them removed. It's like, what? Talk about modern medicine.
Well, here's the first thing I want to think. Like, okay, big picture. What's going to happen to the children of those children later? Is it going to mess up their chromosomes and lead to like handicaps in some sort of way in the future generations?
I don't think it would, but I mean, what have we learned time and time again? People rush into something and eventually the consequences surface.
Yeah. Oh, well. So we have to get back to our original planned review of Monty Python and the Holy Grail. We had quite a hiatus because it was a rocky summer for all of us, but we knew right away that we had to get in on the Jaws episode after having that fun time at the Coolidge Corner Theater this past Labor Day.
Absolutely.
And I encourage anybody who lives in the Boston area next Labor Day to make the trip to the Coolidge Corner Theater for one of those screenings. It's awesome.
They have great stuff all year. I mean, coming up is Blade Runner on 35mm. I've seen Blade Runner on 35 there, and it's worth the trip. I mean, they do a great job there.
Like I said, it's a concert. It's an experience. You have people that are coming there.
Go see one of those at Coolidge Corner than to go to a music concert.
Yeah, I mean, I think I've only been to 2 concerts in my life. They were both Bruce Springsteen. That was my senior year. I opted to go instead of going to prom because I was too chicken to approach a girl. And it was like, okay. Yeah, so I went to see Bruce Springsteen. That was great. And then last year I went to see him again. But those are the only 2 concerts I've ever been to. But I have loved going to movie-themed events.
Absolutely. I check them out at Coolidge Corner. Not a sponsor yet. But
yes.
I'm happy to give them the praises they deserve.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess till next time, we're just signing off.
We're signing off. So are we doing Monty Python next, or are we going to do Devil Wears Prada?
Coda, don't get our listeners all hyped up for the entire schedule of movies that we have ahead of us.
Well, they will have to tune in to see which one we end up doing next. But
Okay.
We're back.